The city skyline shimmered in the distance, a monument to progress and power. Daniel Carter used to look at those towering buildings with ambition, believing that one day he'd rise high enough to belong among them. But now, as he sat beneath a crumbling underpass with his back against the cold concrete, that dream felt like a cruel joke. He pulled his threadbare coat tighter around himself, shivering against the biting wind. The smell of damp pavement mixed with the distant aroma of grilled meat from a restaurant he could never afford. He had been hungry before, many times, but tonight the ache in his stomach felt unbearable. 5 years ago, he had everything. A stable job, a one-bedroom apartment that was small but his, a morning routine that started with black coffee and ended with late-night financial reports. He had been building something, a future, a career, a name for himself. Now he was just another invisible man in a city that never looked down. Daniel had always been good with numbers. As a kid, he could mentally calculate the price of groceries before his mother reached the cashier, a skill that had amused her but impressed his teachers. It was no surprise when he pursued finance in college, landing an internship at Langston Enterprises, one of the most prestigious investment firms in the city. Arthur Langston, the founder and CEO, was a name spoken in reverence. He was a man who built an empire from nothing, a self-made millionaire with an eye for talent and a ruthless approach to business. Though Daniel had never met him personally, he had studied his career with admiration. Through hard work and a relentless drive, Daniel secured a full-time position after graduation. He worked late, volunteered for projects, and moved up the ranks faster than most. At 28, he was earning more than his parents had in a lifetime. He should have been safe. But the illusion of security was just that, an illusion. When the company downsized, Daniel never saw it coming. The meeting had been impersonal, just a polite but firm conversation with HR. Economic shifts, they called it. Unfortunate circumstances. They thanked him for his contributions and handed him his severance package. The numbers on the check looked generous at first, but they came with an expiration date. At first, he told himself it was temporary. He had experience, connections, skills. He'd find another job before the money ran out. Except he didn't. Weeks turned into months. His savings drained faster than he anticipated. The rejection emails piled up. The few interviews he secured led to vague rejections. We've decided to go in a different direction. Then came the overdue notices. The landlord's patience thinned. He stretched his severance check as far as it would go, cutting out luxuries until even necessities became a burden. First, he canceled his gym membership. Then he sold his car. Soon, he was rationing food, pretending he wasn't hungry some nights. Then the eviction notice arrived. Daniel never imagined he'd be one of them. The men and women huddled in alleyways, sleeping in bus stations, invisible to the world. The first night on the streets was the hardest. He had nowhere to go, no one to call. Pride kept him from reaching out to old friends. What would he even say? Hey, remember me? I used to have a 6-figure job. Now I need a couch to sleep on. The shelters were overcrowded, the waiting lists long. Some nights he found space in one, other nights he curled up in a doorway, using his backpack as a pillow. He learned quickly how to survive, which alleyways were safe, which restaurants left the most edible scraps in their dumpsters, which places would kick him out the second they saw him walk in. He learned that kindness was rare but not absent, that some people still offered $1 without judgment, that a warm coffee from a stranger could feel like a lifeline. But he also learned that once you fall, the world stops seeing you as a person. One evening, after a particularly brutal winter night spent huddled beneath layers of cardboard, Daniel sat outside a coffee shop, watching the rush of people heading home. He wasn't sure when the numbness had started, but it was there now, a quiet resignation that this was his life. Then he saw Ethan Connors, an old colleague from Langston Enterprises, walking by in a tailored coat, laughing into his phone. For a moment, Daniel almost called out to him. Surely Ethan would recognize him. Maybe he'd help. Maybe he could vouch for him somewhere. But just as he opened his mouth, Ethan's eyes flicked toward him, and then slid away as if he wasn't there. He hadn't even recognized him. Or worse, he had and chose to ignore him. The realization hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. Whatever version of himself he had once been was gone to the world. He was Daniel Carter, the analyst. He was just another homeless man blending into the background. That was the night he found the wallet. He had been walking aimlessly, trying to ignore the hunger clawing at his insides, when he spotted it lying on the pavement outside a diner. The leather was smooth, expensive. Someone must have dropped it in a rush. His pulse quickened as he picked it up, fingers trembling as he opened it. Cash. $100, maybe more. Enough to eat well for days. Enough for a cheap motel room where he wouldn't have to worry about freezing to death. Then he saw the ID. Arthur Langston. The name sent a jolt through his system. It had been years since he had worked for him, but he still remembered seeing it on official company documents. This was his wallet. Daniel's first instinct was disbelief. What were the odds? But then reality sank in. He could take the money. No one would know. No cameras had caught him. But he would know. A man who had lost everything didn't have much left, but he still had his integrity. And so, with a deep breath, Daniel made his choice. Tomorrow, he would walk into Langston Enterprises again. Not as an employee, not as a beggar, but as a man returning something that was never his. And he had no idea that choice would change his life forever.